Hello, I'm John Hine, Director of Compass Resolution. Today, I have the pleasure and privilege of talking to Simon O'Connell. Simon is a chartered financial planner at Evelyn Partners and has worked in the financial services industry for over 30 years, providing advice on retirement and investment planning, inheritance tax, and intergenerational planning for families. Simon is a member of Resolution and sits on the Evelyn Partners Family and Divorce National Committee, heading up the team across the south of England. Simon helps family practitioners, such as myself, a mediator, working with our clients to achieve fair financial outcomes on separation. Welcome, Simon.
Hello. Morning, John. Thanks for inviting me.
No, you're very welcome, and good to have you with me, and for our viewers, of course. Thanks very much. So, look, guys, our hope is that by the end of this conversation, about 30 minutes, you'll have a clearer understanding, hopefully, of the service Simon offers, why it's so important, and how to work with Simon as you go through the mediation process, significantly improving your chances of reaching a successful financial outcome together. So, Simon, here's the broad context I'd like us to kind of think about and talk about today, if that's okay.
Okay.
So I've got a separated couple. They're in a financial mediation with me, hoping to reach a financial agreement together. That's what they've told me, in the most cost-effective way. Yeah. They've provided me with their formies, their financial statements, outlining their assets, liabilities, incomes, and expenditure, which, as you well know, will include a variety of assets normally. I call a bowl of fruit, properties, small businesses, pensions, and so on.
Yeah.
And there's going to be lots of them to think about. And lots of them to be potentially worried about as well, of course.
Yeah.
I would have set these figures out in a financial summary spreadsheet for discussion, generally in the first mediation session. So I'll put pings on my screen on a spreadsheet format. The couple would have told me and told us that what they want is a fair financial outcome. But often they have slightly different ideas, of course, about what fairness means to each of them and what they're taking into account when they think about fairness.
Yeah.
And they'll also, I often find in my cases, and you'll be the same, I'm sure we'll talk about in a minute, they need help to understand some of the financial information, as well as help with exploring during mediation and maybe outside mediation with you, their financial options and all the implications.
Yeah.
So Simon, over to you. I don't do all the talking, of course, you're my guest. So over to you. Can you give our viewers some examples, maybe of, kind of very fresh in your mind, of cases that you're working on to help them better understand what you do and how perhaps you can help them in these kind of financial cases?
Yeah. So what I would normally do is break it down into several sections. So I think the first thing is property. So, have they got property? What's it worth? Have they got a mortgage? And then where are they looking to move? Is one of them going to stay? Are they going to sell it? Are they both going to move elsewhere? And then secondly, have they got any other properties? So have they got any buy-to-lets or business properties or a holiday home abroad? So that's sort of property broadly. And then you look at sort of cash and liquid assets. So have they got any cash, any ISAs, premium bonds, that type of thing? So money that is readily available. And then third thing really is pensions. So what pensions have they got? Is it a defined benefit or a defined contribution? How close are they to retirement? Are they already retired and is it in payment? Or are they 10, 15 years away from retirement? And what sort of income might that produce? So really, I'm breaking it down into those categories for assets. And then the other thing is income. So what income have they got? And then what income do they need? And what are their outgoings? Because clearly, if they're going to divide and they're going to have two lots of bills, their outgoings are naturally nearly always going to increase. I've seen a couple recently where their income easily meets their needs, so they're not too fast, which is a great outcome. But I've got another one which I was speaking to yesterday where their outgoings, they've put in a double what their income is. So there's going to have to be some reality check about how do they actually fairly share that. So sometimes it's taking it back to basics and saying what do you actually need and what is realistic.
So just looking at the assets for a moment. So why is it important for you to understand and for you to help them understand and see the different types of assets and categorize them in the way you have? Why is that important?
Because there's an imbalance between, you can't really fairly share things equally often. So I've got a case at the moment, for example, where they've got several properties, they're selling their main house, they've got several pensions, they've got a property overseas. And it's easy, they said, we want a fair share, we want a 50-50 split. But what the problem is, they've got several properties that are rented out. So some have rent, some don't. There's a property abroad which isn't rented. They've got their main house. So you can't just, split a house in half. And so there's an imbalance, one between, she wants a couple of the properties, he wants a couple of properties. But there's an imbalance, one in the values of them, and two in the rental income that they produce. So if one person gets one, are they going to get more assets and potentially more income? And in that case, what we're talking about is they're going to sell. There could be a balancing payment where one of them then gets more cash, and that may suit them. So really, it's a discussion between them as to what are they looking for, and then how do they fairly share that? One might want the house in Spain, and one might not, for example. So you come to what do you want and what don't you want, and then how do you fairly share the other assets so that you end up with a roughly 50-50 share. But bearing in mind that going forward, it's not always going to be exactly 50-50, is it? Because house prices will go up at different values. If there's different rents on the different properties, and pensions, I think, is the one area that people generally don't understand at all. So I had a case last week where the pensions on paper were about £1 million. And so they said, right, 50-50. I spoke to the wife and she said, well, I'll get £500,000. I can put that towards a house, for example. And I said, well, one, you can't because it's in a pension. And two, the reality on his pension is that you'll become a member of his pension scheme and will get half the income. There won't be any capital at all. So often, and I'm not sure if he understood that either. So it's understanding what will happen in reality, not just on a piece of paper, dividing everything by two.
So that's really helpful. And so when I'm working in mediation with a couple, and I often start with what are they hoping? What does the outcome need to achieve for them? What are their priorities? Is it house and pension and so on? And often they say, look, we need a home, we need some income in the future, and we need to be able to support ourselves and our children between now and the retirement and pension. And so absolutely. So what I do, as you're doing now, is, and I obviously urge you viewers to be doing the same. Really, is start off by thinking about what are your priorities. Separation's taking place. I'm guessing you're going to want to sort out future housing and so on. So you start with that, and then of course what you're saying is, I think, is that look at the assets and look what you've got to play with. How are you going to achieve the priorities, your priority needs, if you want to call it, with what you've got? And that's where you could be really useful, I'm guessing. So they've got this bowl of resources, capital resources, income resources, and each of those resources, those bits of fruit, if you like, could meet the different needs. Pension can meet future income needs, capital can meet housing needs, and so on. So it's matching up the assets and their financial resources with their needs. And that's, I think, where you could be, from what you're saying, really useful. And so there's two parts to that. How can you give the viewers a particular idea or a specific idea? Is this? So it's not. I'm dying two parts now: the computation part, the assets, the data, what is there, and then let's talk about the next part separately, if we can. What are they trying to achieve? And so, within the mediation process, I've got my financial summary now. When might you get involved, and how might you get involved with this couple and me working with them to understand what they've got and whether they've got the right information, whether they need any more information, and so on? How would you get involved at that point there, within the gathering and understanding data?
The optimum bit really is when you've actually gathered a lot of that initial information, because it makes it much more useful for me, particularly to see that in advance. So if you know there's a meeting coming up and the couple have agreed that this will be the situation and they're happy to share the information, the couple I've dealt with recently, it's much more useful to get that information in advance, because I can sit and look through it and understand and think about what tax implications, what pensions implications might be, and then you can have a more meaningful discussion, because I'm better prepared to ask the right questions. Otherwise, going in blind is quite difficult, because you're faced with lots of data. And I saw a wife the other day, and there's pages and pages of data, and she doesn't really understand a lot of it. But I've seen a lot of it in advance, so I can talk through what it means to her and what it will mean to the husband. The problem is, if you go in blind, you're sort of trying to do it on the hoof, if you like, and you're trying to think about things as you go, and it's easy to miss things. So I think getting stuff in advance, thinking through it logically about what's a priority, what questions to ask, and how to craft it effectively to think, what they should be thinking about.
So what would you want from me? So let's say I'm the mediator, I'm the facilitator. I'm helping this couple communicate, make decisions together, reach outcomes together, and that's what I'm doing with them. They funneled through it to me all their financial information, well, as much as they can. They've done their best.
Yeah.
But actually, maybe there are some complications. Would it be helpful from me to get the financial summary from the first session, maybe, and an idea of actually what they're hoping to achieve, and then I can throw that at you, and you say, actually, John, it would be. I mean, I'm trying to get a sense, or I'm trying to give the viewers a sense of what you might be doing, and at what point in terms of the process. So I'm giving you a financial summary. Yeah.
Well, because you'd have gathered some of it, and you understand some of it as well. So I think often a mediator will write to us and say, look, this is a situation, but we've had a discussion. This is, other than just 50-50 share, this is what they'd like to achieve. She wants to stay in the house. He wants to get this. They've got an imbalance of pensions, and pensions is always the one difficult thing, because often people don't understand it and what will be the implications of it. So really, it's explaining it. So I think, you just sort of setting out, here's the data, but you've got a rough understanding of what the couple are looking for. Next meeting to say, okay, what does that mean in reality? How do you fairly share those assets? Is there tax implications? Do they understand the pensions? And it's usually the pensions that is a real sticking block, because as we know, often pensions can be one of their biggest assets. It can often be the biggest asset, or the second biggest, really, after the house. So that can have a big implication. And people don't understand the pensions, and because it's a bit boring and a bit technical, they've never made much attention to it, because it's something that will happen in the future. But pensions are just to provide an income in retirement. They're not an asset to share as in a house. So it's that imbalance between future income and capital needs now.
Sure. I mean, we don't go too much detail about pensions, but sometimes you can release, 25% tax free and so on. And actually, if they're not final salary schemes, you can draw on the fund, but there are tax implications. So okay, so I'm getting a sense of, and obviously our job is to give the viewers a sense of. So I might have the couple might have provided me with their Form E's, their financial information. I put it on the spreadsheet, and I finished my very first session with them. And out of that session, we will have asked questions about the finances for them. So we'll have a more accurate financial summary. They will have an idea of, I will have an idea, they'll have an idea from each other of their priorities, their approaches. I'll then summarize that. That seems to be would be a good time, because I often say to them, look, you both have an idea now of how you're each approaching this. You're pretty clear now. We have to clarify and identify what each of your priorities are. I think now would be a good time to bring in someone who could give us more insight, more financial expertise, as you start to think about reality testing the options, or the options that you're going to want to explore in order to construct the outcome to meet your priorities. And that's, I think, maybe a time. Would that be a good time to bring you in and say, okay, here's a financial summary. What do you think about that? Any questions you've got about that? And this is what the couple are hoping to achieve. Could you have a meeting with them, but with them both? I mean, as a neutral, is that something you could do?
Yeah, definitely. And funny enough, I've had a couple of cases recently where the wife has actually approached me and said, I've got a settlement or a proposal. I don't understand it. The husband's done all the work previously. He's the one who's bought the houses and understands the pensions. And there's an imbalance. There's often an imbalance in power, isn't there, between one person who really, in all couples, it nearly always happens. It's often the man, but sometimes the other party, where one has done all of the work in the past. They understand the finances, so they're more comfortable with the settlement because they sort of understand the tax implications, possibly the pensions implications. And the other party really hasn't got a clue because they've never really been involved in it. They've never really paid much attention. They've never really needed to, because they've always assumed the other person is just getting on with it and life has worked out okay till now. So it's often that imbalance of power recently, where both the wives came in to see me. And interestingly, during the conversation, I said it would be, when I was asking questions, they said, well, it would be really helpful to have the husband here to have understood this as well, so that we can get the same information. Because otherwise, you're sort of like whispering around, trying to say, well, what did he say about this and what did he say about that? And so both of them, I've got one meeting next week with the husband separately, I understand what the wife wants. I don't understand what the husband wants. And rather than, they've both got lawyers involved, but rather than just sending letters backwards and forwards, because they're not really, I mean, it's fairish, but they want a 50-50 outcome. They're not really talking particularly. So I've met her, but he's done all the work. He's the one with all the knowledge and has bought everything. So there's an imbalance in knowledge. She doesn't really understand anything. So I'm helping her understand it, but equally I can't really come to any agreement. So I've no idea what the husband wants. So he's happy. She's emailed him. He's happy to meet me separately, have a chat with him. Then I can then try and understand what both of them are trying to get out of it. And then we can try and craft something between them that meets both their needs, because they've got different needs at the moment. And it's making sure that they're both comfortable with what they'll end up with, and does that meet what they need. Luckily, they've got enough money probably between them to meet their needs. And it's understanding it, and and it's also understanding the tax implications. And so, for example, if you've got several houses, one's got a load of capital gains and one hasn't got any, you don't want the one person ends up with the value of the houses, they sell it, and then they've got a big tax bill they didn't expect. And that's not uncommon either.
No, you've got to, as I say to couples, it's really important to that what you think you've agreed is what you think you've agreed. And so there's no point getting something and suddenly you realise years later that you've got a massive tax bill and it's reduced things and so on. No, okay, so I think I understand that. So I could let's give our viewers a bit of a scenario, because we're talking about the mediation context here. So I'm working with this couple, and I might identify that despite the emotional context could be quite tense, the different kind of maybe the different priorities they're each placing on different things and so on. So maybe a lot going on. But essentially, if I identify that one of them, could be the wife, could be the husband, would benefit from, because they have a lack of knowledge. There is this power imbalance, and it comes in many forms: power imbalance, information, emotional, and so on. But there's an information and knowledge imbalance. And I feel that, and I've done this a number of times, by the way, I feel that actually that one of them could benefit from working a bit more closely with a financial expert to support them in understanding and expanding. And then that you could possibly work in that consultancy basis, but also I could then bring you in and facilitate this, because often the climate's quite tense. Bring you in as the wife's helper, supporter, to come in to explain, broaden the conversation. Say, okay, wife Sheila, let's call it Sheila. I don't think you've got an option there. We've got a few options you want to talk about in mediation with Simon's support. And Bill, let's call him Bill, one of any other name. Bill, you've got some options I know in mind, and so on. Well, now with Simon here, maybe it's a really useful time, Bill and Sheila, with my help, to maybe reality test these options and see, what are the tax implications? What were the implications of option 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Because every option will have an implication, I'm guessing. And that's why it could be really useful to have you driving reality testing, asking really questions from your perspective as a financial expert. Is that would that work? I mean,
I think it does. And also, I've had mediators who actually said that I can be a little bit more challenging sometimes without, in a nice way. But I'm always very keen to get a fair outcome, because I think particularly we know that men, for example, have 3 times bigger pensions than women in general, and then divorced women end up even worse off. So, there's often wives will say, well, I want the house and I'm not bothered about the pension, but what they're really ending up with is a poor retirement, because often if the husband is also a bigger earner, he's got the ability to then build up his pension again, whereas the wife either she's not working or she's working part-time, and all of a sudden now she's got a house to manage as well. She hasn't got the spare income to build up her pension. So there's often imbalance there between what they think is sensible today and what the future might look like. So it's bringing a reality check. And also, even I've had cases where I'm it's clear that I'm working for one party. So the wife has asked me to work with her. I would still, if I'm not happy with it, I would still challenge her as well, with the husband, and say, you've got a better sense of reality here. This isn't going to happen, or I'm not I'm not just batting for her. I'm trying to get a fair outcome for both of them. So they both come away happy.
You're stress testing, helping them to stress
Yeah,
test the reality of what they're thinking about.
yeah,
I
yeah,
guess the way I could like to put it is you're helping them perhaps see things from different angles,
yeah,
perspectives,
yeah,
from different timelines, future, present, and so on.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah,
Really, literally reality testing. And I think
yeah,
and the other thing you mentioned, which is a really good point. Sometimes when the couple are in the moment with me, that's stepping back from their current views and their current thoughts and their current thinking and their current can be quite difficult. You bring
yeah,
in if you can put a distance between what's going on there and what they're currently thinking and distance it and push out a little bit to another expert to give a view, that can often shift a perspective or help them perhaps see things slightly differently, and be able to explore different perspectives. So
yeah. Also, it's non-emotional. I'm taking emotion out of it to a certain extent and explaining the reality without understanding. I'm not bothered about who said what, who left who, what's happening. It's really just about these are the facts, trying to make it non-emotional and take that out. The other thing is adding value. So the lady I saw last week, I asked about inheritance tax. Oh, well, we haven't thought about that. You've got some other assets there. What are you thinking about those? Oh, we haven't really discussed that. So sometimes it's adding extra value because if, for example, they've got children and they've got a big tax liability, well, I'd rather preserve the money for the family rather than the taxman. So if they haven't thought about that, sometimes it's adding in things that they're not maybe on the table today, but there's certainly a reality for the future, is that either one or both of them is going to have a massive inheritance tax bill. So how do we avoid that so that the family, the children and the grandchildren get it, not the taxmen? So often that's not even a part of a discussion initially of separating.
So you're sitting there and you're listening to this, you're watching, and have you thought about, has it occurred to you both couple, is it something that's important to you to inheritance tax planning? I'm just wondering. And if they say, oh yeah, boom, then
yeah, exactly.
So on. So that added value, that added perspective, that added value, and then being able to help them take the things that they wouldn't otherwise have thought about into account and creating. I come to creating because you're trying to help them create a new reality for themselves, i.e. financial and so on. I like that. I certainly like that. And do you? Okay, so they've now reached their fair financial agreement. They've understood the figures. You've helped them, or one of them, or both of them. We've now reality tested, bringing you into mediation. You may have worked with an outside mediation. They've reality tested, and they've got their options down to one set of proposals and agreement. What part can you play in helping them? I don't know, deliver that agreement. I mean, let's say they've got a court order as well.
Yeah.
Making that into a binding. What part can you play? How can you help them with the post agreement, the post order?
So it depends on what the reality of the settlement looks like. So if there may be that one person is going to get a big payout from the pension, for example, so they're going to say, well, you're going to have X amount to be put into a pension, and the person will say, well, I haven't got a pension, or I don't know what to do with it. So it may be, where's that pension going to go? How old are you? When are you looking to retire? What risk do you want to take with that settlement? We always make sure they've got enough cash available. So short term, we'd normally say at least 6 to 12 months of outgoings as ready cash. And then, if they're going to get a big lump sum, for example, outside the pension, what do they do with it? Are they looking to buy a house on it? If they're going to get more than they need and they've bought the house, or they know how much the house is going to be and they're still a lump sum, again, what are they going to do with that? So if they take with it, how long are they looking to invest it for? What do they need that for, basically? So for one or both parties, often there's going to be a share. It might be that one person holds more than the other. So say a pension, one person's going to have to share their pension, and they're going to. The reality is they don't know what to do with it. So it's particularly if it's the wife that's going to end up with the money and they're not used to investing, it's getting them comfortable with that. Looking at the future, what does that mean for them? When are they likely to need the money? How are they likely to take it? So it's just thinking about those options and trying to create the next step for them in terms of making it clear what does the future look like for them and modelling that out. Maybe some cash flow to say, will the settlement meet your needs? I've got a moment where it doesn't look like it will. So there's going to have to be a reality check to say you probably can't meet all of your needs. So what are the priority needs and how do we meet those out of the settlement? Because sometimes there's not enough money to do everything, is there? You might have a nice wish list, but in reality, you can't tick everything. So it's looking at the priorities.
So again, I guess, yeah. So again, it's once they've got what they've got from the financial settlement, it's helping them identify, as we're talking about this process of identifying what their priorities are for the future, what kind of lifestyle they want to lead. Is it possible? What have they got? And helping explore those options and make decisions for themselves. So as I said, I mean, I'm conscious of time a little bit, Simon, because so what we've taken our viewers through from your perspective and the mediation is that there is definitely a role, as I see it, for you at the early stages, helping this couple, one or both of them, understand the information they've got, the assets and liabilities and incomes, and so that they can, and the possibilities, what they can do with it, and then help them explore against their priority needs and so on within the mediation, just and maybe outside the mediation as well, working with them, reality testing, and then also post settlement, there's an important role for you. So you're, if you like, their financial kind of one or both of them financial partner, you could be within that whole journey from separation to the post-separation year or 2 years or well into the future, during mediation and beyond. And that's so that you are a valuable asset.
Yeah, it's usually the person who hasn't got the financial knowledge and confidence. So what they really want is someone to hold their hand through, certainly through the negotiation, through the post-settlement, and then their reality afterwards. So what does the reality look like? In a year or two, it will look a bit different. You know, they'll have moved out, or they'll have been in the house, the person's left, they've got a new reality. And it's often it will be the person who has got the financial stuff to say, actually, I'd still like that person to be looked after because it still helps the relationship. It helps the relationship with the children, maybe. Or the grandchildren, for example, the person without the financial knowledge and confidence, to give them some knowledge and some confidence to move forward. And it's usually probably holding their hands for the first maybe year, 2-3 years. Because they really say, I really don't know what I'm doing. I really need someone to help me through that transition. And it may be in 3 or 4 years' time, everything's sorted, they've moved on, and life is a lot simpler. At the moment, it's just a fog, isn't it? It's a fog of information. They don't know what the future holds. They don't know where they're going to live. You know, there's too much unknowns. Once the reality is hit in and there's a lot more certainty, then it's really holding their hand for the first couple of years and then seeing where it goes. And often people say, I really need that help for the first 2 or 3 years post settlement.
So you're helping giving them some clarity, and out of clarity comes confidence and the sense of security, and giving them a nice pathway and so on. So just as we bring this kind of conversation to an end, I mean, I knew it would go flip by far too fast. We've got loads to talk about and so on. But but here's my question: let's say I've got a client who I think I identify would really benefit from your services, and they've had a look at your profile on the website, and I promoted why it would be a good idea to use it. How would you get involved? What are your terms of business, that kind of thing? So how would it work?
Yeah, so we send out a terms of business and our sort of standard information of data privacy and things like that. And I suppose there's 2 options really. Is one or either client likely to use us in the future for advice? So it might be the first meeting, might just be a bit of guidance. It might be the initial conversation. You've brought me in and we're having a chat. And it may be obvious. I mean, I had a mediator recently said, look, there's going to be nothing in it for you. The reality, there isn't any money left, afterwards, but they really could value you. So I just charged for that meeting because there isn't going to be anything else post that. If it's likely to be that one or both of them will become a client, it's sort of on paper, it's obvious what the outcome may be. And therefore, what we'd probably do is get to know them, understand what their priorities are. I think for me, it's a bit like saying, I need a new kitchen, how much is it going to cost? You say, well, I need to sort of measure up, understand what the size is, what you're looking for. It's that sort of thing, really. It's the first bit is maybe we're not charging for every hour just to get there, but it may be a bit of time and effort in advance to say, well, actually, the person has said, I definitely want to use you. I'm definitely going to get some money. And I'm not a fan of charging for every hour, for every bit we do. We'd normally do fixed fees. So it's understanding, is that person likely to become a client? And if so, we'd understand the reality, and it would just be a bit of work to get to the settlement. And then afterwards, that client has said, I'm definitely going to use you for something. and then they'd become a client in their own
Okay.
right. We'd send them the terms of them a fee agreement up front. So yeah,
Okay.
we'd tell them what the fees would be, and they agree to that before we do any work effectively.
Okay, so you'd meet with the client, you'd have a kind of initial chat, you'd scope the work, scope what they're looking for, how you might add value, and then kind of costs what they're after, what their kind of service that you think they would they tailor the service to the requirements of the situation effectively.
Yeah, we've got a menu service. So do you know, are they likely to need ongoing advice? Are they likely to need ongoing investment management? Is it just a one-off transactional type thing?
And so the client can then decide, actually, oh, that's too expensive, but actually that'd be useful. I can afford that, and actually that's useful. So you can give them options. Again, it comes down to options, doesn't it? Options.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't force them down one route. Give them several options, and then say what is important for them, and then let them choose. And often they don't. You know, if the person who hasn't had the financial background, that some of their control has been taken away, so it's given them back a bit of control and a bit of choice to say, actually, you know, it's your choice. You can choose which parts of this service you want.
Really important theme, and really important. Actually, a really important theme, a really good theme to end on. Actually, Simon, you know, when you and I are helping separating couples, it's often a theme of that separation that it can be a very disempowering process for both, actually, in many different ways, emotionally, practically, psychologically.
Yeah.
So our job as professionals within our own roles and capacities, as I see it, is to be able to support our clients with our expertise and so on, to enable them, help them through that process. So, look, I want to thank you very much for sharing your expertise, helping our clients, our mutual clients, separation clients, understand a little more about how you can help them as they go through that separation process, and actually how important and why it's important that they have someone like you to work with one of them or both of them, and for the reasons we've talked about. And so, look, I do want to, I know you're really busy, really busy and in demand. You're just telling me just before we came on air, Simon was telling me, guys, just before we came on air, that how, you know, he's already had 5 inquiries recently, so he's really busy. It's clearly a big need for his services. So if you do think you need Simon, have a look at the website, have a look at his website, but have a look at our website as well. And I'll certainly be recommending him with my mediation clients. So again, finally, Simon, thank you very much indeed for your time. And if clients want to contact you, I've got your details on my website. If they want to contact you directly, in fact, I said your email's on my website, so they can do that, or they can contact you, I guess, through Evelyn as well, Evelyn Partners as well.
Yeah, I'm on the website. Yeah, so email or phone, just setting out what it is they're looking for, really. So
brilliant.
Thanks for asking me.
Brilliant. No, you're very welcome. And thanks. Thanks again. And have a good. We're on Friday, so have a good weekend. And see you soon. Bye bye.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Bye.